2 years ago, the National Institutes of Health stopped using chimpanzees in so-called invasive research, saying that new technology rendered it largely unnecessary. But animal research is still common in the U.S. Most of the test mammals are rodents. Researchers are also experimenting on tens of thousands of man's best friend, some in federal labs at taxpayer expense, including at the Department of Veterans Affairs. On Friday, a member of Congress asked the Inspector General to open an investigation into the VA's sometimes painful and secretive dog experiments. A note, we've decided not to show horrible pictures of hurt animals so that you can watch without turning away. It's an unpleasant and difficult topic, so we decided to begin with some more heartening video. 150 research beagles rescued in India by an animal rights group. The dogs were being used to test cosmetics. Some had reportedly never walked outside their cages. Here, they're free to move about for the first time in their lives. It's very much legal to use dogs and other animals in approved experiments in the U.S. For obvious reasons, it's also the subject of much debate among animal rights activists like People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
A National Institutes of Health laboratory in Maryland has confined hundreds of monkeys and bred dozens of babies each year to be predisposed to mental illness.
And on the other side, deeply committed research scientists, represented in this video by Americans for Medical Progress.
What we do here is very responsible, very humane, and very likely to lead to improved health care for human and non-human animals.
We can't say whether something new is safe or whether it works unless it's gone through a proper set of tests. These tests actually have to begin at the level of animals, so it's very important to do that.
But you might be surprised to learn how many dogs are being used as test animals. More than 61,000 in fiscal year 2015, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which by law oversees animal welfare. Some of those canine experiments are conducted by our own federal government at taxpayer expense in ways that aren't transparent and are hard for outsiders to evaluate.
We're not talking about cosmetic companies, we're not talking about pharmaceutical companies, we're not talking about charities, we're talking about beltway abuse, government agencies experimenting on these dogs.
Anthony Bellotti heads White Coat Waste Project, a group that wants to stop taxpayer-funded animal experiments. Can you summarize what you learned about what's going on here?
What we learned is that there are over 1,100 dogs, beagles, other hounds that are currently being experimented on in government agencies.
Those agencies include the National Institutes of Health, CDC, FDA, the Pentagon, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, or VA. Bellotti says the VA falsely declared it wasn't experimenting on dogs. For example, the VA research facility in Richmond, Virginia, reported using no dogs or other animals in fiscal year 2016.
What we found in our analysis of their paperwork, that in 2016, the Veterans Administration said they were not experimenting on any dogs. Didn't turn out to be the case. What we found was that they were indeed experimenting on these dogs. We're talking about experiments involving high levels of pain and distress, unrelieved with anesthesia or pain relief.
Through a deep dive into government documents, Bellotti's group learned of 6 projects at the Richmond VA Center using dogs.
We're talking about experiments in which dogs are tethered to treadmills, forced to run for periods of time to stress their hearts. They suffer spontaneous heart attacks after devices are implanted surgically. They run, they have heart attacks, they kill them, they dissect their hearts, and they look at basic curiosity-driven research.
Other federal experiments in 2016 included an NIH study that subjected beagles to controlled bleeding to induce shock and see if transfusions with fresh blood are better than old blood. More dogs died if they got old blood. Versions of this experiment were also done in 2010, 2012, 2014, and 2015. Bellotti also learned of a VA study that force-fed dogs and made them repeatedly vomit to study the muscles. Is it necessary these days to do animal testing, at least in government agencies?
I can't imagine it. I'm not sure how the VA got involved in it. It puts a lot of animals at risk, and I guess some of them are actually dying as a result of it. That's my understanding. So we're going to clearly look into it in the very near future.
Congressman Vern Buchanan co-chairs Congress's Bipartisan Caucus for Animal Protection. He signed this week's letter asking the VA Inspector General to investigate whether animals are being harmed unnecessarily and whether taxpayer dollars are being misused. What about for people who say animal research is maybe a distasteful but a critical component of studies that has to be done to make life better for people?
I don't agree with that. I don't think we need to put our animals at risk, and I think most people would side with me on that point.
The VA declined our interview request, so we couldn't ask about its disclosures, experiments, or the results. In a statement, the agency said its animal research is carefully monitored, subject to a strict system of review and oversight, and complies with federal and state animal welfare laws.
Just one matter.
At a hearing about the VA's budget earlier this month, Congressman Sanford Bishop questioned a VA representative about a letter White Coat Waste Project sent about the animal research.
Do you intend to undertake that investigation, and do you have any idea how long that will take?
I got the letter about 5 o'clock last night.
Right.
I read the letter. I responded to the gentleman who sent it saying we will review it, and we're in the process of reviewing it, and we'll determine whether or not it's something that makes sense for us to do.
Defenders of animal research emphasize how crucial it's been to saving human lives, whether creating vaccines or treatments for diabetes and heart disease.
We have mice that we're using to unlock the mysteries of Down syndrome. We have pigs with coronary arterial stents used to treat cardiovascular disease. And we have dogs that have telemetry devices implanted in them to measure intraatrial and ventricular pressure to treat heart failure patients.
But Bellotti argues a big problem is lack of transparency. There's no easy way for the public to even know the outcome of the VA dog research funded with tax dollars.
Their own internal policies say they need to be posting the results of these studies. They're not doing that. How are we as taxpayers and medical professionals, doctors who treat veterans, how are we supposed to determine if we should be investing more in VA-style heart attack experiments on dogs if they're not even abiding by their own rules in posting the results of these experiments? We can't make that judgment call.
The VA also told us that its research has had far-reaching and lasting impact to all Americans, resulting in life-saving products such as the implantable cardiac pacemaker and the nicotine patch.